welcome to our 7th annual UN Sustainable Development Goals and Global Human Rights gathering. This year, it's the halfway point in the pursuit of human rights, peace, global goals, and partnership. And it's a hopeful moment and a midpoint to monitor, measure, and mobilize the SDG world movement. We're looking at our common agenda, outlining opportunities for civil society, but also promoting a plurality of possible futures for the summit that has been declared in 2 years, that's looking for the global goals, human rights, and the force of law. Yesterday was a very significant day, as was our first day here in New York. And at the opening of the GA opening week and high-level debate, we actually did have the speakers, the heads of state making it from the funeral in the United Kingdom. Began with Brazil and was followed by Biden. Biden's speech really did outline some of the important issues that we'll be looking at. One of the first points he said as the second speaker at the opening, which will continue throughout the next week, is he said that he hears in the streets everyone asking for one thing when they're in those streets: basic dignity. He also cited the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and more importantly, demanded that people clamoring for that would be joined by the chorus of the rest of humanity, and noted the ethos that's in the UN document, the UN Charter, beginning with "We the People." We're starting the 77th session of the UNGA. I reflect as we're looking at the Ukraine conflict and war, and also looking at the halfway point for the Sustainable Development Goals. And yesterday, we looked at the review of the Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination and the UN SDGs, as the United States was just reviewed. But today we're shifting. Today we're looking at UN SDG 14 and 15, life below water and life on land. We're protecting our whole world and promoting a partnership for our planet. And we will start looking at a very important issue for the people of the Pacific and Oceania, but applies to all people. It's building a movement for deep seabed mining moratorium in Moana Nui Akea, protecting the Pacific, and looking at deep sea mining's unsustainable development goals. And it's amazing to be able to see exactly the perfect backdrop that was created. I'll hand it to our first speaker, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for coming and speaking about deep seabed moratorium. Many people are not aware of this important issue, but it's probably the most important one under SDG 14 that's not on the global radar.
So thank you so much, Joshua. Aloha to everyone. Thank you to participate today. So I'm going to share a screen. I have a bit of a presentation to discuss some of the issues that we will be looking at when examining deep sea mining. So let me hope this works. Okay. Yep. So for quite a few years now, Seas at Risk, which is a Brussels-based NGO working for the protection and restoration of the marine environment, has been really considering how the impacts of deep sea mining, which is at this point a proposed activity, it's not actually taking place, and this is very important in terms of the first time in which, as humanity, as a civilization, we have the capacity or the possibility to prevent an activity that will likely cause great harm before it actually starts, instead of after the consequences arise, and then we of course try to do something about them. So usually we have been looking this against the backdrop of the SDGs, of the Sustainable Development Goals adopted in 2015, but somehow the way in which deep sea mining undermines the SDGs is so profound that we have recently come up with this approach, and we kind of jokingly but very seriously also in a way called it Deep Sea Mining Unsustainable Development Goals. So you can see this on the backdrop here, but it's basically about how to try to illustrate and how to present how deep sea mining, if it goes ahead, will effectively undermine not only the goals 14 and 15, which we'll be discussing with a bit more detail, but actually the whole global goals and the global agenda in ways in which not always we really look at. So it's not only talking about environmental impacts, but more deep and profound impacts that actually cover the whole SDG. So we're going to go very briefly through some of these. Very soon, Seas at Risk will be releasing some articles that kind of discuss this problem, this paradox of an activity which is being regulated under the International Seabed Authority, risks causing such global damage. So just for those of you who might not be familiar with deep sea mining, it's again a proposed activity which basically intends to extract metals from deposits that are found in the deep sea. So at depths of up to 5 or 6 which are now one of these forms are small spheric concretion, millions, which said include significance of manganese and of commercial interest. Cobalt-rich crusts have similar composition, but they are top of mostly which many of you may know are particular diversity hotspots into migratory species, and then also in sulfide deposits, which are related to hydrothermal vents, which are also found in the seabed, and we will see how they are also important. So until now, it has the technological difficulty of extracting metals from the seabed at such great depths has kind of prevented its development. But in recent years, both the support for technological development, rising metal is that the first exploitation licenses, sorry, in international waters could be granted within the next year and a half. And a number of countries are also looking at exploitation within their national waters. So just to show you that, these are some of the areas in which in international waters, which are under the responsibility of the International Seabed Authority, which is the global body which has the dual responsibility both to regulate activities in the seabed, but also to protect seabed ecosystems. So you see a number of areas, and the one which we'll talk a bit more today, both because of the focus on the Pacific, but also because it's the area in which deep sea mining is more likely to happen in the near future within international waters, is the Clarion-Clipperton zone, which is this area you see here, somehow between Hawaii and the coast of Mexico, and it's called the Clarion-Clipperton fracture zone. And here you see some of the exploration licenses, contracts that have been granted over the last years and decades by the International Seabed Authority to explore particularly nodules. This is an area where these nodules are present in the seabed, so they're lying in the seabed, and where the focus is now. So you see how this vast area, which is approximately the size or the length of the continental USA, this huge area has been put up in patches and basically granted away to a number of private companies and states, which are either sponsoring private companies or themselves working to exploration. These are some of the areas you can see, and one of them in particular, which is now under the metals company, is the one that has triggered the so-called 2 years rule, which means basically that if within 2 years of that triggering of that rule under the International Convention of the Law of the Seas, activity could be authorized even if regulations are not in place. So there is a real risk that within the next year and a half, the first contracts could be granted. And this is one of the reasons there's currently so much attention on this activity really happening in the next in the very short time frame. So to look at how deep sea mining relates to what we have called the un-SDGs, so the Unsustainable Development Goals, I would like to first look at what we have called un-SDGs 1 to 6 and 10. And to do this, it's important to understand how in the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, which is kind of the international constitution of the oceans beyond national jurisdiction, it said that the seabed in international waters is the common heritage of humankind, and that the use of any resources within this area, which is internationally governed, should be for the benefit of humankind as a whole. Now, if we reread this paragraph, this letter of this wording of the convention, this would of course relate to what the global community and states and non-state actors are working to advance for the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly on poverty, on hunger, on health, education, and so many other critical aspects that would of course benefit humankind as a whole. But now if we look at how this benefit was to be shared, we see that this is really not the case. Each of these mining operations, each of these patches that we saw in the previous map, could generate up to 1.5 billion euros, equivalently the same amount in dollars now, per operation annually. And the current revenue sharing schemes that have been discussed in the International Seabed Authority are basically suggesting that the member states of the ISA, so this would be the way in which this benefit for humankind would be generating, under 100,000 euros or $100,000 would be provided to each of the member states per year out of this 1.5 billion of revenue. So this, just to put it in terms, with $100,000 for example, you would not even to be able to purchase a newly equipped ambulance. So how can this really contribute to the SDGs in terms of bringing this benefit? Then another issue is actually that some of these contracts for mining, which have to be sponsored by one of the member states, are being sponsored by small island states in the Pacific under incentives, sometimes very neo-colonial, of some form of revenue sharing with them, but sometimes also minimizing the risk that really exposes these small states, these small island states, to immense liabilities because of the unknowns associated to deep sea mining, the damages it can cause to fisheries at regional or global scale, the damage it can cause to neighboring states, to other property, to the ecosystems. And now imagine one of these mining companies, as it happens on land, becomes bankrupt, and then liabilities are then, the negativities are then shared by society, and states have to end up taking care of those. It would be these sponsoring states, many times small Pacific nations, that would end up having to respond for the actions of the companies they're sponsoring. There's precedent to this, for example, with Papua New Guinea, that a few years ago supported Nautilus Minerals that was going to do deep sea mining within their jurisdictional waters, and after investing a significant amount of funds from the state into the company went bankrupt, leaving a huge debt. So this is just a reminding and an early warning to what's happening. In terms of health, there's a number of ways in which deep sea mining contributes to bad health and unwelliness. One is, of course, the critical role that the oceans play in trapping carbon. They're the planet's carbon sink. They detoxify compounds. They have an immense regulatory role in climate and in temperature and marine chemistry. And now by disrupting these, the magnifying effect it can have over crops, over many issues that relate to climate is immense. And then it's also curious that we're actually targeting ecosystems that we hardly know. And this involves the possibility, the very real possibility, that we'll be destroying forms of life, making species extinct before we even know them. And this can, of course, also limit, for example, the discovery of new medicines. Think of the COVID test, and how it was actually discovered or developed using isolating an enzyme that was in the microbe that can only be found in the deep sea hydrothermal vents. So imagine if we are now destroying these areas which have so much potential for knowledge and that are so unknown, what would this mean? Last, with these un-SDGs is the issue of gender inequality. And for example, if you take the International Seabed Authority's Legal and Technical Commission, which is one of the critical decision-making bodies within the ISA, has a critical role in authorizing licenses and assessing environmental impacts. Only until 2022, only 3 out of 30 members were women. And apparently now, after this year, is going to go up to 6 out of 30 members, experts being women. So this says a lot about how we're really not paying attention to the need to have women in these very critical decision-making bodies. Another issue, which is why deep sea mining is part of a narrative in which global problems, including climate change, need to be addressed by growth, by more growth, which basically means more metals. The number of estimates have calculated that in the next 30 to 40 years, we need to double or triple or quadruple our extraction of metals. And this is, of course, presented in a way which has been called the myth of decoupling, which means that we can continue to extract more, continue to generate more waste, but without the severe environmental impacts that both extraction and waste generation has. And of course, deep sea mining plays into this narrative of the possibility of perpetual growth that kind of ignores the planetary limits. And it also sometimes hides the fact that deep sea mining, if allowed, if it actually went forward, will actually only provide a very small fraction of metal demand. So it's not only not going to solve the issues, but it has the risk of generating problems that we're not even able to imagine what it could mean in terms of a generation or in the medium to long term, but would have this just for a very small percentage of the ground. Now, another more general issue is how this narrative of growth, this narrative of more metals being the only solution to the problems we managed to get into precisely through extraction, and particularly with carbon, with fossil fuels, is that it putting more primary metals, so metals that come either from terrestrial mines or from the deep seas, is actually undermining this transition towards circular economies and circular societies. And to really put an emphasis on recycling, on designing products, both to last longer, to be able to be repairable, and then to be recyclable. So the fact that markets are flooded with primary metals means that there's less space and less incentive for secondary metals that can be recirculated within society. So those policies are put in place, and the technological and innovations that are needed are implemented. And another sign in this would be un-SDG 9, so innovation and infrastructure for destruction, is how, if we compare the amount of funding and, for example, in the EU for deep sea mining extraction technology, so everything from the machines, the enormous machines that would crawl and crush or suck up nodules from the deep sea. So this kind of the funding that has gone into technological development and innovation is so big compared to the funding on basic research about the deep sea and deep sea ecosystems and the impacts of deep sea mining. So we're putting the money in one basket while severely underfunding our understanding of the importance of these deep sea ecosystems, what they mean in terms of the planetary's regulatory functions, and also the impacts that deep sea mining itself could have. And this is one of the reasons why there's a strong emphasis on this moratorium. We need time to know more about the deep sea and the impacts of deep sea mining before we can even consider allowing this activity to go ahead. And now going into impacts, we already mentioned this, but the oceans are the world's biggest carbon sink. They capture an immense amount of the carbon that is generated. And the fact is that deep sea mining is likely to disrupt this regulatory functions of the ocean, but in a number of ways. First, it will release carbon that is sequestered in the seabed, has been there for thousands or millions of years, but also it will disrupt the ocean's capacity to continue retaining carbon. And this happens through a number of ways. If you look at this graph here on the right, operations will take place on the seabed, and this in the first place generates a plume. So these clouds of sediments in suspension that are mobilized through these vehicles spanning vast areas in the sea. So this would have direct impact on all life which is at the seabed and in this area. But then, of course, this nodules or the crushed crust would be sucked up to ships and then sorted out initially, with the waste being pumped back in. And this would again generate immense plumes that through ocean currents would travel hundreds or thousands of nautical miles. So it would not only affect the immediate area with where mining would take place, but through ocean currents, much greater areas throughout the oceans. And this will in first place disturb the capacity of carbon fixing organisms, so filter feeders like phytoplankton, which are key for this ocean's function to retain carbon, but then are also critical as part of the ocean's food chain. So if you eliminate phytoplankton, you're going to be affecting the whole food chain, and particularly fisheries, which are very important also for local economies and resilience in island nations in the Pacific. Also, if you think of hydrothermal vents, these play a very important role in regulating climate, so the temperature of water or ocean, geochemistry. Knowing these, the impacts that this have are still unknown, and the problem is to go ahead and do this activity without a proper understanding. Going now to destroying life below water and destroying life on land. Of course, if you suck up the nodules, for example, this is a habitat which is highly specific for a number of life forms that has taken millions of years to generate. So this will never recover. There's no way these habitats, nodule habitats, can ever recover, be restored outside of geological time frames. So we would be talking of millions of years before nodules would appear again, and basically all the associated life forms and the whole ecosystem would disappear. And the deep sea is a very vulnerable habitat, and you can see that any minimum intervention will be there for very, very long periods of time. The same is true for seamount ecosystems, where we would have those crusts that would be crushed, and this includes coral habitats, but also as I mentioned, seamounts are hotspots of biodiversity, so not only thriving with life locally, but also very important for many long-range migratory species that use these seamounts for entry. And then also think, and you can go back to this image here, that these would be operations that would be taking place non-stop, 24 hours a day, 300 and every day in the year, and up to for 30 years per operation, and throughout the water column, 5,000 to 6,000 meters, producing noise, vibrations, producing light pollution, and this would affect the way in which a number of species can navigate, can communicate, can relate to each other. So the impact, and this of course is not again only a local impact, but something that could expand through great areas, and particularly if you look at the area of Bounthone with so many areas under potential exploitation in contiguous zones, the accumulative effect would be massive. And then, of course, the issue is that, as it was mentioned, deep sea mining is not meant to replace the damage which is already being now caused by terrestrial mining, which we know is a huge problem in terms of pollution of waters, biodiversity loss, landscape, but also human rights violations, particularly with indigenous peoples around the world and local communities which are replaced or that are targeted with violence. But deep sea mining is to happen in addition to mining on land. So this would have a multiplying effect, and this is why it also relates to un-SDG 15, which is destroying also life on land, in addition to this opening this new frontier for destruction. And the last two unsustainable development goals, 16 and 17, have to do with the way in which these bodies actually are not fit for purpose. I mentioned before that the International Seabed Authority has a dual mandate under the UN Law of the Sea, and this includes protecting the deep sea ecosystems in addition to regulating economic activities. And since years now, it's been clear that the ISA has turned into particularly its secretariat, into a tool for developing deep sea mining in particular, and has been advocating for this, disregarding its own mandate to protect the deep sea ecosystem, it is ill prepared both in terms of structure, of its own composition and bodies, but also eventually in the future for enforcing any effective control on activities that can have such profound impacts, and which the ISA is not equipped to really monitor or enforce. In addition, in terms of accessing in contracts or accessing annual reports that, you know, in any other UN body, NGO society, and at large, these would be public documents. There's an immense deal of secrecy, so lack of transparency is something critical, and it doesn't is not promising in terms of this being the body regulating such an activity. The exclusion of NGOs, so very limited capacity for civil society participation, while in other UN bodies there's an active process of trying to find ways to better engage civil society. Here it's the country, we're trying to find ways to include NGOs, independent journalists, legal and technical commission. So immense conflicts of interest, secrecy in meetings, leakages of confidential information to mining companies while others are not allowed access to them, and then the issue of spending, which is also problematic, and that also has generated conflicts even within the ISA. So in all, this is a way of looking at deep sea mining, by which we see that not only is it creating obstacles for you know, making progress towards the sustainable development goals, but really it's creating this space for a completely new global agenda, which we try to share through these unsustainable development goals, and we'll be looking into offering some more insights and details of each of these. And just to finish, I'd like to put a little animation here on what deep sea mining means and how it's a continuation of our extractive ideologies and practices, very much linked to the legacy of colonialism, which has also been so problematic, particularly in Pacific island nations. And I hope then this is a good stimulus for maybe having a wider discussion on deep sea mining, on the need for advancing a moratorium. Fortunately, more states are now giving a step forward to really pause, stop, and think before we go anywhere into this really unknown world of potentially destructive consequences. So again, thank you so much, and I'm open to any discussions.
Thank you so much, Joåm. And it's a wonderful way to start International Day of Peace, which of course is September 21st. And we appreciate your leadership as well with the Center for Global Non-Killing, and really bringing a comprehensive analysis to what deep seabed mining would do and what it means, but also how it goes against every element of the global goals, which every country has signed and agreed to uphold. And so I love the creative graphics, but your systemic review also shows how it just goes exactly in the opposite direction on every front and left nothing to really be questioned. And if you look at, we have a couple of questions here, and I'll try to link them in with the SDGs and to continue our conversation. But on the no poverty, zero hunger, and good health and well-being, you really did bring up how it will not in any way benefit the people. It just perpetuates that system of exploitation and extraction that has existed for centuries in colonization. And one of the viewers from the Pacific pointed out, it's really seen now as this last gold rush, one more chance to make a huge amount of wealth without hearing the will of the people, because it's a unified voice from the people who would be directly impacted. And the idea that this person shared with us from the Pacific was that they say, unlike the territorial or the ones above sea, looking at SDG 15, it could go on all the time, endlessly. And the companies try to claim it would not have any impact on the lives of the people. So this one viewer was pointing out it surely would, as in impacting food, nutrition, the fish, but also even on a deep cultural element where people are able to call sharks to be able to come and visit them and disrupt that with all that noise. And that you see that as well around the examples of sonar testing with whales and dolphins. So the amount of energy being put in to pull it out as fast as possible without having any environmental impact statements, the safe standards in many ways compromised, there's nothing for that there. So on number 1, 2, and 3, people very much on that. This analysis was the best review ever to be able to provide the basic science, the technical aspects that people never know about, what is a nodule and those aspects, but also the transformational elements of what we need to do and how we need to stop this. And it really provided the basics for the campaign as we look going forward. Also, your number 5, showing how few women are involved, really reminds me of Sylvia Earle and her plea, because Sylvia Earle had really shared what you discussed. We are just beginning to be able to know what's there. So why would we destroy without even finding out what is there? Submarines, and go deep into the Northern Marianas Trench to go to places that people have not gone before. And he's there. Nothing's worse than not knowing and destroying something that could provide so many benefits, but also has a desire and a reason to exist for its own right. The other aspects, of course, that we're looking at there on 6 and 7, very important, that they try to claim also in this quest now for renewable energy that certain actions will have to be taken. But that's been the argument that multinational corporations have made forever, to then argue their number 8 and 9, that, oh, we're doing this all for that, with entirely ignoring that we know it's about profit, and also that false philosophy of endless growth. And we could see for the 2 years from the Earth Summit plus 20 until the course where the will of the people had said no more, that we have to be able to see everything as job at sharing about sustainability, looking at cities, human rights cities and communities in number 11, and responsible consumption. And that's something we all have to think of. We cannot keep taking from the earth. We really have 7 years until we reach a point where it's irreversible harm. And you did an amazing job, of course, connecting 13, 14, 15. Those are the main climate ones. And this action, if it's allowed to go forward, would entirely go against the 2 documents that were agreed upon in 2015. The Paris Agreement, which I think you could even provide more analysis on if you look at that, plus the global goals in the 2030 agenda. And by the way, you shared that. 2 people from Fiji were excited about partnership and was hoping that we could look at going forward. So your analysis, as well as your ability to share and open up this discussion on the Global Day of Peace, it pointed out, of course, there'll be no peace for the people of the Pacific. So much for starting, and it'll be exciting to hear your response. And then, of course, as we get into the other 2 areas, it looks at what's happened too long, too often, but reinforces exactly what you're sharing, where people are standing up for their basic human rights on land, and those are being ignored. And of course, the voice of the people of the Pacific understand that Oceania and Moana Nui Akea, our great Pacific, doesn't divide us, but connects us, and the water flows everywhere. And it reminds me of one point I'll never forget. When I first learned about deep seabed mining, I was at an event and I said, you know what, I'm going to go because I don't know all the science, which you explained very clearly. And I went to meet with people at the East-West Center who had been involved with it with decades. And I asked some basic questions. I said, sorry for my ignorance. Do you have a way to seal it so that when you're trying to extract it, it doesn't just get all over all the corals and this debris and everything? And they're like, oh, no, nothing. And I'm just like, what are you thinking? That, oh, the ocean's so vast, it will just keep moving and it won't have any consequences. And I think you clearly expressed the consequences, and also connected with 2 big treaties that are coming up. First and foremost, the Beyond Borders and National Jurisdiction Oceans Treaty that was here negotiated and did not come to a conclusion because of a couple countries and the International Chamber of Commerce, but also the Plastics Treaty. Many people are here in New York actually for a launch this morning, right now at 9:30, to actually come together as a coalition to make sure that the Plastics Treaty must be strong, because everyone knows the ocean and the movement, these plastic gyres are coming, and that we have to be able to prevent future harm. And this is that one philosophy point that I think you alluded to, is that it's actually to do no harm, to actually not cause something even worse. And everything you shared show it would open up an entire amount of new challenges when we're doing our best to try to get a hold of everything in these remaining 7 years when it's most valuable to do it. So a lot of applause from the audience, great presentation, and really do love the way that you went through every 17 of the global goals, pointing out its impact on the ground and how negative it will be. So if you want to answer just a little bit, I know it was a lot, but it was great to see the responses so far.
Future generations, that indigenous communities and societies have embraced, but sometimes we seem to have missed in terms of deciding to consider that in terms of how we make decisions in the present. And deep sea mining is one such example of how a decision that could or could not, hopefully not, be made at this point to address this need, apparent need for more metals to solve the issues we have been creating, the problems we have been creating in the last century, may really create issues for generations to come, and issues and problems that we're not even able to completely grasp because the knowledge is not there. But then to go to the other issues, there was the issue of Nauru, and we can maybe use that as a thread because many island nations in the Pacific and in other places around the world, of course, are still suffering the legacies of colonialism and how these had a lot to do with extractivism and with mining above land. So if you think of Nauru, how the island was basically destroyed through phosphate mining that went on for decades, basically rendering most of the island useless for for the agricultural uses of the past. Or you think of Papua New Guinea and the use of the issues caused by copper mining, and how that has created toxic legacies for future generations, how it has created political instability, which is what has been called the paradox of abundance, yeah, or the resource curse, when not having resources does not necessarily lead to wealth and well-being in communities, but very often actually leads to the country instability, prolongation of conflicts, corruption. And unfortunately, it seems, or there's some indicators that deep sea mining is building from these colonial legacies, using the same kind of tactics to get states which might be vulnerable in certain ways into accept the terms of, for example, sponsoring a Canadian but with US capital company, which is the metals company, formerly Deep Green. It's the company that is being sponsored indirectly by Nauru, and that has been triggering this 2-year rule. So basically meaning that on this company's behalf, on the metal company behalf, Nauru has asked the ISA to grant this exploitation contract within the 2 years, even if the regulations which are being negotiated are not in place. And again, what most of the organizations, and now fortunately also a number of countries and leaders globally are calling now, is to stop. It's not an issue of negotiating rules which is basically impossible in a question of months, but really of stopping to see if this is something we can really allow to happen, given the knowledge gap that we have on the impacts of this activity. But also, if we look at the un-SDG 16 and 17s, how really this whole institutional framework of governance of the seabed is not really there. It's not fit for purpose. And the ISA is one example. But you mentioned the BBNJ, so the fact that we might be transitioning towards a new oceans treaty, it should be a moment to really pause and reconsider what we're going to do, but also our responsibilities towards future generations, and the principle of precaution and not doing harm that we can then maybe not solve.
Oh, excellent points. And here we are, we're on the land of the Haudenosaunee and the Mohawks. And we really have to think of 7 generations. We really have to hear the voice of Indigenous peoples, who has always had that long-term perspective, especially as the UN announced its Summit of the Future. It is such a short-sighted strategy and a horrible policy to even consider at this point. You almost think it's science fiction and going in the wrong direction, and impossibly so. Yet the 2-year and the quick movement points out the power of the corporations and always their ability to act swiftly and to challenge and make things difficult for the people around the world who are directly impacted. And I think of all the upcoming potential actions that could happen. Really, deep seabed mining goes against, as you said, numbers 16 and 17, but also those core principles of the global goals of furthest behind first and leave no one behind. Because if this goes forward, it does nothing but exacerbate through exploitation, extraction, exactly what all of the global goals are, but also educational at the same time. So thank you so much for your sharing. If there's any concluding comments, that's absolutely welcome as well. And we will see, I think the one aspect that we talked about is what's that window and how is there any aspect to be able to influence that? The Seabed Authority was supposed to usually meet in the summer. I believe the ISA is located in a wonderful location of Jamaica. So many people, know about going to Geneva or go about going to New York, but very few have a presence in Jamaica, where this is being just after the UN General Assembly high-level debates are over this week and the opening week is ended. What can be done going forward?
Sure. I mean, there's many ways of participating from the bottom up, from the top down. There's recently, just during the summer, there has been a global declaration of parliamentarians for a moratorium on deep sea mining. That is now being signed by over nearly 250 parliamentarians. I would encourage you to get in touch with national or state or regional legislator representatives to support this call and to spread that message. There's a number of organizations which are working in the Pacific and globally and in a number of countries where there's also the issue of mining happening within national jurisdictional waters. In Europe, for example, Norway is advancing. Other countries are also, Japan is moving forward with that. So it's something to keep in mind. I would encourage you to get to learn about some of the ongoing campaigns and some of the organizations which are coordinating efforts, both at the grassroots and to also influence policy at the national, international level. I know that during this week at the UN General Assembly, there's also a lot of discussions on the high seas, but also on deep sea mining. So that's really the way of continuing to build alliances between movements and peoples. And we have a very little time today, I guess, but these are some of the ways in which I would really encourage everyone to connect up through the existing networks and movements. Try to, I mean, my colleague here, Tiago, might want to say a word. I don't know if it comes. But anyway, Seas at Risk is also one of the organizations which is working with these events. Tiago, would you like to add anything maybe on the next things that are going on?
I wrote him a little note as well to say that the space was available in these concluding moments.
Sure.
It is.
But anyway. Oh,
no,
I think he might be with on the news. So anyway, thank you so much. Please, take this issue and let's get together. Let's collaborate to bring about, the alliances that need to be there to stop this before it happens. It's really a historical moment in which we can really prevent such a destructive activity before it actually takes place. So again, mahalo for organizing this, and we're looking forward to more.
Thank you so much. And that is exactly the perfect point of what we're looking at. It is concluding it before something happens. And that's just what doesn't happen enough. And it also brings up a good point of one more thing that's happening here at the UNGA. There's the campaign for an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on human rights and for future generations. And it's looking, of course, at the climate crisis that's being brought forward by youth from the Pacific and also by Vanuatu. So all these issues, of course, as you pointed out, are all linked and we have to consider these, but this preventative approach and also your call for a participatory process to make sure that we can ensure that our oceans are not further contaminated and ruined without even knowing what's there, and more importantly, how it could impact. So we thank you very much for being here. Tiago said that he thanks us for participating as well, and we look forward to future events. We'll now shift back to land. We'll walk back on. And what was kind of significant this year was the right to a clean, healthy, sustainable environment resolution was adopted at the UN General Assembly. That was adopted at the end of July. And what we'll be looking at is that right to a clean, healthy, sustainable environment, also looking at life on land, looking, of course, at climate as well. And we're fortunate to be able to join with two examples from Asia. We will begin with our colleague in Mongolia, who will be able to share what is happening there with a French company and how it's operating, which really does illustrate a lot of the points that was brought up earlier about what would happen under the sea and how people be impacted, but it's happening right here, right now, and all just for the pursuit of gold and wealth and ignoring the human rights and the global goals on the ground in Mongolia. I'll hand it over to my colleague, Ganzorig. Thank you so much for joining us here at the UN General Assembly at the 7th Annual UN SDGs and Global Human Rights Conference in New York. Thank you so much for joining, and please share with us what's happening in Mongolia and what people can do to end this harmful practice of what's happening to the herders and the people being impacted in the desert there.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Josh. Thank you very much for letting me event. Can you hear me?
It's a little breaking up.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, very good, very good. Can I share screen so that I can show
Definitely.
PowerPoint presentation?
There you go. Please share your screen and allow us all to be able to go visit the Gobi Desert with you virtually. Perfect.
Can you see it now?
We can, and you can even make it full screen if you want to. But it's perfect, and it'll be a very valuable contribution on the International Day of Peace so that the people of Mongolia can have peace. Excellent. Don't worry, that looks fine.
Okay, just a minute. Okay, so in this brief, I would like to talk of serious human rights violations taking place since 2004 in Ulaanbaatar village, Southern Gobi province, Mongolia. Ulaanbaatar village was established in 1921. Population is 1,542 people. Total area is 104,000 square kilometers. Ulaanbaatar village is located 596 kilometers from Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital city of Mongolia. Now, in 1996, French corporation Orange's subsidiary, Badr Energy, at that time it was called Gobi. Badr Energy started uranium exploration in Ulaanbaatar, Southern Gobi province in south of Mongolia. You see the map of Mongolia. Down to south, you can see the red mark where is the Southern Gobi province. The Badr energy discovered in the Langwood deposit in 2002 and soft ore deposit in 2010. The event taking place now in soft ore deposit. On January 26, 2013, the Ministry of Mines officially classified soft ore deposits with more than 50,000 tons of uranium deposits. So its source would be 50,000 tons of uranium. Thus, Mongolia is one of the top 10 countries with the largest uranium resources. Up to date, in Mongolia, Badr Energy is completing full cycle of development, mining, processing, and export of uranium. Badr Energy is using so-called in-situ recovery or ISR method to extract uranium and it started since 2004 and it continues up to date, so it means almost 20 years. ISR involves dissolving uranium in the ground and pumping the solution to the surface where the minerals can be recovered. That's the method France Urano Corporation is using. Now, in connection with the uranium mining activities, Ulaanbaatar local herders complained that in the last 20 years, Badr Energy uranium purchasing work caused serious irreparable harms and damages to local Mongolian people, nomadic lifestyle, their economic gain, drinking water, wildlife, and unique desert nature. Many locals claim that during this time, their domestic animals such as goat, sheep, camel, and cows unexpectedly died after drinking local stream water. He said that when people slaughtered animals for meat, animal internal organs such as liver, lung, and kidneys were extensively damaged, swollen, and these were not eatable. People in Mongolia traditionally drink milk tea. However, these local people now say they cannot drink milk tea anymore because wild water was polluted and the water makes a milk curdle. Herders complain that in spring they could have less and less baby animals, young animals, because many of them too weak to survive, born sick or hairless. Furthermore, he said that the observed mad foxes and white-tailed antelopes had been dead without any obvious reasons. These people mostly live on their animal products such as milk, meat, wool, and hide. These are major support for their everyday life. He said and tried all these dairy products and products from their domestic animals. Because of animal death and loss of young animals, herders lost their major economic source of income. Ulaanbaatar local people never had any such bad experience. They have been living happily in their homeland since 1931. Before Corona came in there in 1996. That's still what the local herds claim. However, the government of Mongolia and the Badrach Energy categorically denied local herders' claim. Now I shall bring up some documentation and evidence. Number of reports documented water pollution in uranium mining area. I'm not talking about one report, but there are a number of different reports. One of the major documents was the report produced by the Science Academy of Mongolia. After its working group made on-site visit in Joåm Badrach Energy uranium mining site in July 2021. The report states that local herders use 18 wells water in about 19 kilometers area from the uranium mining site. However, 8 of the 18 well waters contained 12 to 39% fluorine, arsenic, magnesium, and uranium. Therefore, this water didn't meet Mongolia water drinking standards. Water sampled from one of the well water called Buying Mongol contained high correlation of uranium and thorium. The report concluded that water wasn't drinkable, and the Science Academy recommended to use other source of drinking water. This means 8 of these well waters cannot used for drinking. However, local people said that they still drink this polluted well water and watering their domestic animals because there is no other source of water in the Gomursen area. As I said, so domestic animals dead. So this is one of the examples. 7 cows were dead after drinking local stream water. Not only well water, but stream water also polluted. This image provided by Mr. Ganzorig, and he sent it to me from the Facebook in November 2021. Another image, another example. This young sheep and goat born dead. These were too weak and some of them died after born, or some of them born dead. This is again Ulaanbaatar Urung dying Queen's White place. It's not far from the uranium mining site. A photo provided by Mr. Huko. He is head of the NGO and fighting to help the local herders against the Corona Corporation. This is another picture. This is another local herder. Her name is Arun Jargal. Again, she's from Ulaanbaatar province, Turun Gobi. She said, we had some 40 born dead, hairless young sheep and goats. The picture from March 26, 2014. And this picture actually was posted to column.org, that NGO organization also trying to help and support the local herders through some pictures. Now I'm talking about wildlife. The water pollution, of course, not only the hurting the life and local people, but also it's having terrible consequences for wildlife. On March 9, 2021, the Ulaanbaatar village government and veterinarians worked together to find and safely dispose some 70 antelope corpses from the water stream. Can you imagine 70 wild antelope, 70 gazelles had been dead? It was Aragland, Ulaanbaatar village. Aragland is very close to Badrach Energy uranium mining site. This is a picture from article, uranium poisoning killing white-tailed antelopes in Torngobe province. It was posted website natak.mn on April 26, 2021. Again, this is the picture from same area, same day. At this time, veterinarians inspecting dead antelope. As I mentioned, young animals, domestic animals had been dead or were born dead. Same thing happening to wild animals too. This is young gazelle been dead. I brought some list of evidences. I don't want to go over all this, but there are many evidences. I brought just few of them. Websites like Zinda, Dataman, column.org, and the other newspaper, news sites publishing lots of information and news about the Ulaanbaatar uranium mining activities. Even the German magazine published article about the uranium poisoning, uranium pollution in March 2014. So as I said, this water pollution started long ago, even indicated in 2014. Now, I would like to mention few things what the local herders are doing. Local people didn't idle they took certain actions. They requested and urged the state and local government to find out the cause of polluted well water. You know, my understanding is that they taking action step by step, tried to communicate their message to local government, provincial government, and then they appealed the state government. I brought only 3 examples what they did. So first, they filed lawsuits with administrative courts against the Batrach Energy company. 2 administrative cases pending in administrative court. In a Ulaanbaatar administrative court opened case on June 27, 2020. So it's been almost 3 years. Court is still not rooted. This is administrative case opened in Ulaanbaatar, capital city of Mongolia. There is second case, administrative case opened on October 29, 2021. This case opened in Dorngobi Provincial Administrative Court, but still not met final ruling. Second action they taking local people is the criminal complaint. So criminal, Mr. Chanthalavong is a herdsman from that area. In March 2022, filed criminal complaint with the Independent Anti-Corruption Agency. It's again another investigation agency like police, alleging that Batrach Energy bribed with chief Ulaanbaatar village local representative so that they can cover up these harmful uranium mining activities. Secondly, on September 14, 2021, another complaint about water and environment pollution filed with Capital City Ecology Police Department. Now I'm talking about the third group of action that local herders took. The local herders presented complaints to the state and local government. One was that on June 4, 2020, some 534 herders petitioned against Batrach Energy mining work and appealed Dorngobi provincial government for intervention. On October 1st, 2021, Ulaanbaatar village citizens meeting issued order number 8 requesting a temporary stop of Batrach Energy mining work. 2. Another local people complaint on August 16, 2021 with the office of the Prime Minister, and they sent letter to local NGO. Actually, the office of the Prime Minister sent letter to local NGO notifying that the government addressed the issues about the polluted water issues to the 5 ministries and agencies in order to take speedy actions. But these 5 ministries and agencies has taken no action and no reply. Third, after all this, in July 2022, local people prepared the letter addressed to Mr. O'Yurton, the Prime Minister, and handed over to his office this letter. And unfortunately, up to date, nothing was changed. The people still drinking the polluted water from the well water. No decisions made on these criminal complaint, administrative cases, and courts took no actions to rule on the water pollution issue. So this means the Mongolian government and the authorities taking no actions what to do with these water polluting issues. Next, I really didn't want to go in details, but just want to show that the water clean drinking water is a key for survival. This simple, very simple scheme could demonstrate how it is important. So in the middle, you see polluted drinking water. The causes first polluted water treating people's well-being, of course. Create adverse effect for human health. It could cause sickness and even death. It could cause low fertility rate. It could actually causing unemployment. If the herders in Ulaanbaatar village, if they don't have the domestic animals, then they would have no job. The major business for these local people is herding animals. If the animals dead, then there would be no job. There would be no job. Lastly, economic loss. Domestic animals, meat, milk, wool, hide, all these they use for their personal use, for self-support. Also, he said he trade meat, milk, wool, and hide. And once they get money for this trade, from this trade, he spent them for their living, or they spent money so that they can send their children to capital city and other centralized area for study, for college study, for university studies. But since they lost the animals, since they lost all this income, they can't live and can't support their life and their children's life. This is just simple logic. Simple, short conclusion. Justice delayed is justice denied. Article 11 and 12 of the Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights recognize the right to an adequate standard of living and the right to access to safe and potable water, adequate sanitation. I just brought the two major articles from this covenant just to illustrate what really the International Convention says. In my view, it appears that it was evident that the serious human rights violations are taking place since 2004 in Ulaanbaatar village, Northern Gobi province, Mongolia, in violation of Articles 11, 12 of the ICESCR. It violates their rights to life, well-being, traditional nomadic lifestyle, food, economic gain, and clean drinking water. It brings long-lasting, irreparable, harmful consequences to wildlife and unique desert nature. This was the major point and message that I wanted to bring to the attention of the Syrian participants on behalf of the Mongolian herders. Up to date, the Mongolian government, courts, and law enforcement authorities have taken no action to determine cause of the world water pollution and protect rights of people. Thus, Mongolia has failed to meet its international treaty responsibility and obligation required by signing the ICESSR. And I urge the government of Mongolia to fulfill immediately and faithfully its covenant duty. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ganzorig, and wonderful quote there from Martin Luther King to conclude that justice delayed is justice denied. Also, your holistic review of the facts of how this had began and how it continues today is important. And what's also exciting is while we're here at the UN General Assembly on the opening week, that you be bringing this case also to the International Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights is also very valuable to see you using exactly our theme of the UN SDGs, but also global human rights, and bringing it to one of the core, really international Bill of Rights mechanisms, the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And your analysis is really good on Article 11.12, which is also SDG 6 on renewable water, because water is life, which is a point that many indigenous peoples are pointing out. Also, we can see how you've done such a systematic review of the violations of the global goals. We think that would be a powerful tool going forward. And we also believe that when we look at some of the examples, you really did connect beyond SDG 15, bringing in SDG 6, but also no poverty, zero hunger. That when you showed that these are Gobi desert herders and these animals are life for them, you really bring up the point that many people know, that there's no jobs on a dead planet. And what you're talking about here is the most sustainable people who are living close to the earth, who then only means of livelihood, which is one that is very much in the circular economy of close to and taking care of, knowing that if they don't take care of the earth doesn't take care of them. But when this multinational corporation comes in, you illustrated so well what the impacts are, those direct impacts on people's lives right away today, and how it impacts their future, and that there will be no future if this is continuing and allowed to go forward. So we applaud your efforts to bring it to the International Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. I also would say you could bring up Article 1. Article 1 is the right of self-determination. That's the common article of ICCPR and ICESCR. And Article 1's right of self-determination is one, to determine one's political destiny. But as you pointed out, there is really no SDG 16 in Mongolia, because the people are bringing the cases through the legal means that should result at least in a hearing or a review, but that's not happening. And the second part, though, of self-determination is to pursue economic, social, and cultural development according to one's own values. And of course, we know that at the grassroots movement in the Gobi Desert, no one would poison themselves or their food, which is their main source of livelihood. And so we think that's important. In Article 2, Article 1, Part 2 of self-determination also says that people can never be deprived of their land and how they decide to use it. So you might want to look at that as well, but we appreciate your analysis, and it's exciting to see what you've done and how you've developed so far on this important case as we go forward. And it's great, as Mongolia's head of state is here, that they know that the people of Mongolia are also saying, these are the things we have to concentrate on back home, and making sure that they don't just give great speeches here, but that there's actions on the ground. So thank you so much, Ganzorig, and we wish you the best at the International Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights in Geneva to continue bringing this case forward. We now move down a bit to the area of Laos. Laos is really the heart of Southeast Asia, and we're joined by the president of Alliance for Democracy in Laos, Bounthone Chanthalavong Wiese, and she will be able to discuss with us other actions that are taking place on land that are impacting Laos' ability to be able to have their self-determination, to be able to make sure that SDG 15 is a reality, but she'll also share some of the other important issues, such as when people stand up for their rights, to say that this project is not in the best interest of the people, that then there's further consequences where we can look at the International Day of Peace. We must have political basic inalienable rights that are enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Rights. And you've pointed out how those must be upheld. Now moving to our colleague in Laos, who's focusing on what's going on.
Of Vietnam, they are particularly dangerous towards Chinese investors. Their contracts are concluded at the free disposal of the country with a term to up to 99 years. According to our survey, about 45% of Laos land area is foreign owned. Corruption is present in almost all cases of land grabbing. In most land grab crime, money goes to corrupt officials so that they can then grant land concession to foreign companies and initiate forced eviction. Anyone who protests against the land grab is immediately arrested or threatened by members of the Lao authorities. Prime Minister Chanthalavong has also criticized land grab and corruption in the country. Such criticism has a certain tradition when new Prime Minister taken office. In the past, community reformers to combat abuse. Unfortunately, these communities will fight with exactly orders where the cases of corruption. China influence in Laos. The government of Laos, PDR, has made concession of land to China, and soft leases will turn up to as long as 99 years in many provinces in the north of the country, where, to example, to the area of the gold standard under the issues of a special economic zone. China built Chinatown and casino to be populated by hundreds of thousands of Chinese without Lao people having any right to break. This is a new kind of colonialism. In recent years, the influence of China, especially military, has in Laos become increasingly larger. deforestation. Despite agreement with the EU and other countries to stop deforestation, the overexploitation of the rainforest in Laos continues. It is true that deforestation by Vietnamese company for the wholesale of transport and further processing in Vietnam is declining. However, this trend is not because the Lao government is stopping it, but because there is a lack of economic forest land to clear. In other words, there is hardly any forest left to cut down. Deforestation that is now being carried out on a large scale is mainly due to the mega projects of mostly foreign entrepreneurs. Environment destruction in Laos. The massive deforestation of the rainforest and the replacement of the rainforest with monoculture such as rubber or banana tree have upset the ecological balance. In addition to the deforestation, there is also the poisoning of the river by mercury and other chemicals. And the adequate budget disposal in Laos, more and more the budget is being disposed in the world, and this starts becoming a problem for the environment. Deforestation through their problem and disaster. Climate policies, particularly tropical issues worldwide, are noticed by most countries. The People's Republic of Laos has developed into one of the worst climate killers. The government of Laos advertised
Thank you, Bounthone, for sharing the overall objectives of Alliance for Democracy in Laos to highlight the human rights violations, but also the UN Sustainable Development Goals. What you shared with us also was able to bring in beyond SDG 15 of life on land, but also really make sure that SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, could be raised, as well as people are human rights defenders standing up to protect their sacred ancestral homelands, but then having a government being influenced by multinational corporations, as well as major powers in the region, in this case, China, with its influence on the basic policies of what's happening inside Laos. We thank you for addressing those, but also you raised an important point that UNESCO, United Nations Education, Science, Culture, has designated certain places World Heritage Sites, and that these practices that are being taken place today are actually destroying potentially the home of the people, but also challenging its status as a World Heritage Site. So we appreciate all that you shared about Laos, about the work of the Alliance for Democracy in Laos. And we look forward and thank you for participating in the UN Sustainable Development Goals and Global Human Rights Conference that happens every year here at the UN General Assembly. We know that Laos is a one-party political government that does not take into account the will of its people, but we appreciate your bravery to always speak truth to power and make sure that the world is aware of what is happening in the heart of Southeast Asia. I think what's also very important that you shared, Bounthone, is that there are renewable energy alternatives under SDG number 7, that there could be solar, there could be other things. And your example of these dams that you share, that there's 96 already constructed. And the sad part is where they're constructed, the people do not have any electricity. So it's definitely an extraction model where the energy that's being produced is not for the people there, but is being sent abroad. And so we appreciate the points that you raised. We think it's absolutely essential going forward that we can put pressure on China concerning the dams that they build upriver, but also to make sure that no more dams are built. And we also appreciate you for bringing up the case of Moi. I see her behind you there, a young woman who did nothing, but actually asked the government to do the right thing for its people as they're being impacted by a dam that they didn't want in the first place. And for her writing on Facebook and sharing the concerns of the people who could not do that for themselves, has then been put in jail and has even been forced to leave her own child, and she can't take care of her child because they've imprisoned her. So we appreciate you for bringing SDG number 5 on gender equality and justice, but also SDG 16, that we have to have strong institutions in every country so that if people are standing up for their global goals and for human rights, that the government actually cooperates and does not actually infringe on those fundamental freedoms. So we thank you very much for raising and sharing that. And it's a point of reflection as we are commemorating the very important creation of the right to a clean, healthy environment adopted in the UN General Assembly, that when people are just standing up for this basic right, they have their right to life and also their basic human rights denied. And it reminds me of really what's at the essence of a movement that's with the right to a healthy environment, that's with the Aarhus Convention, and most recently the Escazú Agreement. We must come up and meet in ASEAN and in Asia to create a regional mechanism that upholds the right to free and public participation in environmental decisions that impact people's lives. We can see the Aarhus Convention has been adopted. It's exciting because now even Guinea-Bissau has adopted it. So we could look at pressuring, looking at the situation in Mongolia earlier and this situation in Laos. These governments, if they don't uphold the right to participate, the right to public information, and the right to be able to have a voice in public decision-making, that there's consequences that happen later that could have been avoided. And so we thank you both for sharing with us about Mongolia, as well as Laos, pointing out that these global goals matter to everyone, everywhere around the earth, and that we must all stand up together to take action to make sure that we can have a rights-based approach to development that includes the voice of the people who are directly impacted. So we thank you both for all the important work. We know you'll be involved here at the UN General Assembly, but also in Geneva this week. And we look forward to continue to make sure that we can reverse this trend of denying people the right to fresh water, the right to life and livelihood, and also all of the 17 global goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank you again. Bye, Bounthone.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
Ganzorig.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.